The old farmer unexpectedly saw a UFO in the countryside. He unconsciously approached the eerie beam of light. In the blink of an eye, he was sucked inside the spacecraft. The old farmer looked around, and discovered that the walls emitted a cold green glow. There were many dead bird corpses in the puddles on the ground. Suddenly, a blob of unknown slime fell onto his shoulder. Where did these mysterious beings come from? Did they pose any threat to humanity? Welcome to the latest sci-fi series of 2025, Project UFO. Set in the 1980s, one night, UFO researcher ZBY was resting in bed. A blinding white light shone through the glass, illuminating his small room. ZBY quickly got up to check his instruments, and discovered strange energy fluctuations coming from a nearby farm. ZBY immediately rode his bike over to take a look. He found that a nearby lake was emitting a green glow. ZBY hurriedly took out his camera to take pictures. Then he took these photos to attend an extraterrestrial civilization conference. As a senior member, he took the stage to give a speech. ZBY had always believed that aliens came from lakes and oceans, not outer space. He speculated that thousands of years ago, an advanced extraterrestrial civilization established a colony on the ocean floor of the Atlantic. The location was near the Bermuda Triangle. This could explain why ships navigating there often go missing without a trace. At this remark, the audience couldn't help but laugh derisively. ZBY knew it would be hard to convince everyone to believe this theory, so he opened a slide to show the photos he had taken himself. The image showed a beam of light, emitted by an unidentified underwater object, indicating that the object was exploring a nearby lake. The television host Jan Polgar became interested in ZBY because of this photo. He even invited ZBY to appear on his TV show, Close Encounters. ZBY handed over all his materials and photos to Polgar. After all, he was studying this just for the truth. He didn't care about the method of public disclosure. The first thing Polgar did with the photo was to have an expert verify its authenticity. Although there weren't as many advanced photo forgery techniques in that era, one could never be sure that someone wouldn't fake it for fame. Polgar then quickly headed to the Polish television station. The news was reporting that the Prime Minister had resigned due to health issues. His duties were temporarily taken over by the Council of State. In short, the city was in turmoil due to the Prime Minister's situation. The person examining the photo quickly reported back to Polgar. The photo hadn't been tampered with, however, since it was taken at night. The image was blurry, visual distortion couldn't be ruled out. Regardless, Polgar wasn't going to let this news slip away. It was ZBY's first time at the television station, so he was a bit nervous. Fortunately, once he started talking about his area of expertise, ZBY began to relax. He stated on the show that the universe spans billions of light years. The feasibility of interstellar travel is very low. Even if wormholes exist, interstellar travel would still take a long time. Since extraterrestrial life constantly appears on Earth, it suggests that they are likely hiding in the oceans. However, Polgar lost the courtesy he had shown while inviting ZBY. He began to question ZBY's statements continuously. If you say extraterrestrial life is hidden in the Bermuda Triangle, why were they captured in another location, and with such a blurry photo? You could claim it's anything. As soon as the show ended, ZBY stormed out. He didn't want to waste any more time on Polgar. After ZBY returned home, Officer Julia, who was also his friend, came over with a television. She hoped he could help her fix it. Julia was severely nearsighted. Her vision was getting worse by the day. She was raising her teenage daughter, Sarah, alone. Although her elderly father lived with them, he was unable to help with anything. When Julia got home, she found that her daughter wasn't there. She hurriedly went out to look for her. She found Sarah standing by the lake, saying she had just seen a strange light, so she couldn't help but come over to take a look. Julia told her daughter that someone might be electrofishing nearby. Don't go out alone at night. After work, Polgar went to meet his mistress, Vera. She was the wife of the Secretary General. Polgar learned from her that the TV station planned to move Close Encounters to an unimportant morning slot. Fuming with anger, Polgar returned home. His wife, Lunta, questioned where he had been. The station manager had called looking for him. Polgar casually made up an excuse, saying he was in the editing room, but Lunta didn't believe him. She had always hoped to work as an assistant at the TV station. Lunta was fully qualified for the position, because all of Polgar's published professional books were ghostwritten by Lunta, yet Polgar had always refused to let her go. Lunta wouldn't let him off easily. The next day, when Polgar got up to brush his teeth, he discovered he had been shaved bald. Needless to say, it was definitely Lunta's doing. After throwing a fit, Polgar went to see the station manager. They had known each other for many years. The station manager explained that this schedule adjustment was also a forced decision. After all, Polgar's shows ratings were dismal. While explaining, The manager noticed that Polgar was wearing a hat and insisted he take it off immediately.
Jasiu, co się stało? Napromieniowali cię?
In the end, Polgar's show was pushed out by a hypnotist. Now he could only wear a wig to record the morning slot. The next day, Polgar received a call from the Secretary General. He thought his affair had been exposed, and hurried to the Secretary General's office. On the desk lay an envelope. The Secretary General urged Polgar to open it and read. The letter was from a place called Truskaka. A farmer named Joseph Kunik claimed he had seen aliens. He even said he boarded their spacecraft. Truskaka was near the border, which caught the Secretary General's attention. He wanted Polgar to investigate the matter. After all, the content of Close Encounters was about uncovering strange events. It was best to have a professional person involved in such matters. Polgar immediately contacted ZBY. He hoped ZBY could go there first to check the situation. Upon learning the situation, ZBY immediately went to find the farmer, and initially judged that the farmer was not lying. The reason ZBY was so interested in extraterrestrial beings was because of his brother's mysterious disappearance. ZBY clearly remembered. It was the night of the astronauts' first landing on the moon. After ZBY and his brother fell asleep, a strange light shone through the window, causing the toy train on the floor to inexplicably power on. Soon after, Julia came to the window to wake the two. The three young people often fished with electricity at night to sell the catch, but that night, the moment his brother put the electro-fishing equipment into the lake, a blinding light illuminated the area. In the next second, the boy vanished. The recovery team searched all night but found no trace of his brother. He seemed to have evaporated from the world. Since then, ZBY devoted himself to studying extraterrestrial life, and was convinced that they came from the water. After Polgar received ZBY's definitive answer, he immediately drove to Truskaka. However, ZBY wasn't very trusting of this cunning TV host. After the last experience, Polgar had to pour some drinks to formally apologize. Polgar decided to visit Kunik first thing in the morning. He planned to find a nearby hotel to stay in. Unexpectedly, he saw Julia on the way. She seemed to be holding a dead cat in her arms, wearing pajamas under her police uniform. Just a few minutes ago, Julia was startled awake by a strange cat's cry. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw her daughter standing at the foot of the bed with a dead cat. She must have gone out to deal with the cat's corpse. Polgar quickly arrived at a nearby hotel. To his surprise, there was a wedding party happening inside. He filled out the registration information and got a room. Then he went to the lobby to have a few drinks. Unexpectedly, he had a brief romance with the bridesmaid. The next day, when Polgar got up, he almost overslept, then hurried straight to Kunik's house. This old farmer lived a very simple life. There was neither a radio nor a television in the house. Polgar asked Kunik if he would be willing to take a lie detector test or a hypnosis test. The old farmer didn't mind either way. After all, he wasn't lying and wasn't afraid of being tested. The group prepared to go to the scene of the incident first. Unexpectedly, the local police got involved as well. They all marched towards a small lake. According to Kunik, the spacecraft had hovered nearby, 6 meters above the ground. It even took him inside the spacecraft. Polgar carefully examined the ground, finding that all the soil was mixed with some kind of white ash. Polgar had never seen such a situation before. He believed further investigation was necessary. The next day, he went back to report to the Secretary General. If Kunik passed the lie detector test, Polgar would conduct a series of neurological and medical examinations on him. Then he would bring chemists and biologists to check the radiation levels at the site. The Secretary General considered this matter very important. He instructed Polgar to ensure that the participants must be honest and reliable. For example, ZBY shouldn't participate because Polgar had publicly opposed his statements on the show before. If this person were involved in the new news, it would greatly diminish public trust. Polgar had a good impression of Julia, so he recommended this police officer to the Secretary General. Julia soon received word from headquarters that she was to assist Polgar in investigating this extraterrestrial incident. If the case went smoothly, she would be promoted and given a raise. Julia was very happy to hear this. On the other side, Lunta found a letter that Kunik had originally written to the Secretary General's wife at home. She told Vera about this matter. Vera also worked at the TV station. She was unhappy that a big story that was rightfully hers had been taken by Polgar, so she went to Truskaka and secretly monitored their activities. The next day, the lie detection expert arrived at the hotel. They officially began testing Kunik. Kunik said that a few days earlier, in the morning, he took a shortcut from Lapa village to retrieve an old beehive. It was a gray dawn, frost covered the grass. Just as he was driving his cart to cross the forest, he suddenly saw some green creatures. They looked very much like frogs, and were as tall as the neighbor's children. Koenig chased these creatures to the edge of the lake. Then the scene at the beginning of the film occurred. Unfortunately, after Koenig woke up, he went home and washed the coat he was wearing at the time. Otherwise, they could have extracted the stickiness from it. The lie detector indicated that Koenig wasn't lying, at least subjectively. He truly believed he had seen extraterrestrial beings. Of course, there were many objective factors to confirm. First, they needed to take a blood test from Koenig to confirm that he had no alkaloids, hallucinogens, or barbiturates in his system. It would also be best to find another witness. Meanwhile, Vera found ZBY. She hoped he could reveal some progress on the investigation. But ZBY said he had promised Polgar not to disclose any details to anyone until all investigations were completed. Vera seized the opportunity to expose Polgar. He had already gone to conduct the lie detector test on Koenig.
Jakoś pan w nich nie bierze udziału?
Niemożliwe. Przecież myśmy się umówili.
Although ZBY verbally refuted, he had already believed most of it in his heart. In a fit of anger, he took Vera to the association's archive room. He was ready to share the information he knew with her. Meanwhile, Polgar invited two experts. He specifically reminded them to bring Geiger counters. This is a particle detector used to detect ionizing radiation. The experts surveyed the area with their instruments. They indeed found an increase in the readings. However, the increase wasn't significant. Polgar carried a camera to record footage. He discovered a few feathers near the lake. Koenig had mentioned that there were bird carcasses inside the spacecraft. Could these wings belong to those birds that fell? Just as he finished speaking, Julia ran over. She said the sketch artist had completed the portrait of the extraterrestrial being.
Jakby znajomy.
Julia suggested posting the portrait nearby to see if they could find a second witness. At this moment, Vera also walked into the hotel. Polgar appeared calm on the surface. However, once the bystanders left, Polgar immediately knocked on Vera's door. Vera falsely claimed that she had come over just to report on local protest activities. Polgar didn't doubt her words. Unexpectedly, there was a red glowing listening device under the side of the table. Meanwhile, Julia finished work for the day and saw her daughter asleep on the sofa. As she tidied up the nearby doodles, she discovered a portrait of a big-eyed creature. Could it be that Sarah has also seen an alien? The next morning, Polgar bid farewell to Vera and went to the hotel lobby to have breakfast. He unexpectedly ran into the head of the Extraterrestrial Civilization Association. Upon inquiry, he learned that ZBY was going to publicly share known information. At the association today, Polgar hurried to ZBY's house to find him, but ZBY wasn't home. Julia happened to come by to pick up the television, so the two went to the association to look for ZBY together. The head said the lecture would begin in the evening. ZBY would come by at 3 o'clock to check the sound system. Polgar was determined to stop ZBY. He wouldn't allow anyone to release information until it was confirmed that aliens had indeed arrived. After hesitating, Julia told Polgar that she had found another witness. Then she brought him to her home. Actually, Sarah had often said in recent days that she would go to the lake to meet a friend. Julia never expected that this friend could be an extraterrestrial being.
Wiedziałam, że przyjdziesz. Powiedział mi. Przyjdzie i będzie pytał.
That Sarah referred to was indeed an alien. The two talked for a long time. When Polgar came out, he was very excited. Now they had found a second witness. Polgar immediately went to see ZBY and explained that Sarah had also seen the aliens. Don't give your lecture just yet. We can make a TV program together. But ZBY had already been tricked by him twice. He wouldn't easily believe Polgar's words, so he candidly admitted, I already gave the videotape to your mistress, Vera. She is currently on her way back to Warsaw. Upon hearing this, Polgar quickly drove back to the TV station, pleading with the station manager not to air Vera's program. He exhausted every means and finally obtained the manager's assurance. Foz had already finished his lecture and announced in advance that Sarah was the new witness. Julia was extremely furious about this. Meanwhile, the hotel recording had fallen into the Secretary General's hands. Even though Polgar received the station manager's assurance, Vera's news still went online. Fortunately, her content wasn't very detailed, but the exclusive scoop was taken by someone else first. Polgar was truly furious. He couldn't help but confront Vera about it. But she sent Polgar to the Secretary General's office instead.
Co, tobie kazał to zakomunikować?
My z Henrykiem nie mamy przed sobą żadnych tajemnic.
Polgar nervously went to see the Secretary General, who appeared calm as usual and wasn't in a rage.
Chyba możemy już mówić sobie na ty, prawda? No skoro dzielimy jedno łóżko.
the Secretary General squeezed Polgar's shoulder, saying that the Central Committee was going to hold a small banquet soon. He thought that if Kunik and ZBY could attend, it would surely provide some entertainment topics for the banquet, so he asked Polgar to invite those two. The security agency must have heard the news and actually came to ask Julia about Sarah's situation. Julia quickly informed ZBY about this matter. From their conversation, a shocking news emerged. It turned out that ZBY was Sarah's father. Soon after, he and Kunik arrived in the capital, Warsaw. Polgar booked a hotel for them. ZBY woke up in the middle of the night to find Mr. Kunik was missing. He asked in the lobby and found that Kunik was sleeping on the sofa there. It seemed he wasn't accustomed to the hotel environment. Polgar invited him to stay at his home for the night. Of course, before the banquet activities began, he first brought Mr. Kunik to the production team for a special interview. Polgar also publicly released the interview video of little Sarah. The program went very smoothly. Afterwards, Polgar took Kunik to stay at his home temporarily. Lunta wasn't angry at her husband for taking initiative. ZBY called to question Polgar, asking why he said in the program that extraterrestrial life came from space. From Kunik's testimony, those creatures resembled frogs and had webbed hands and feet. It was obvious they came from the water. Polgar believed that what mattered most was that aliens appeared in Poland. Where they came from didn't matter. Polgar was afraid of upsetting ZBY. He bluntly said, "You can wait until the banquet starts to share your views with those important people." After he hung up the phone, Lunta picked up a newspaper. In recent days, Lunta had made several trips to the city library and discovered an interesting piece of news. Kunik's father had claimed that he saw the Virgin Mary. Moreover, the Virgin Mary had been imprinted on a tree. It was said that the tree had already been cut down. Upon hearing this, Polgar immediately became alarmed.
Skłonność do konfabulacji, halucynacji, że to jest kurwa dziedziczne.
To nie może nigdzie wypłynąć.
Polgar asked his wife if she had told anyone about this matter. Taryn immediately denied it. However, she had actually met with Vera not long ago. The next day, the Secretary General's banquet began. Polgar and his wife brought Kunik to the event. The Secretary General came over to greet them. Upon seeing them, he was accompanied by the hypnotist, who had been pushed aside from Polgar's program. The hypnotist looked at ZBY for a moment, and suddenly asked, "Do we know each other?" But ZBY denied it. Kunik was soon surrounded by wealthy ladies. They kept questioning about aliens. Then they wanted to reach out and touch Kunik. The Secretary General tapped his glass to signal everyone to focus. He invited Kunik to the stage and passionately introduced humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial civilization. However, ZBY corrected the Secretary General, saying it wasn't a UFO but a USO. This term was coined by ZBY, meaning unidentified submerged object. Although Kunik discovered the spacecraft on the grass, submersibles could also fly. That didn't mean aliens come from outer space. ZBY pointed out that fishermen on Ruggin Island had seen such USOs as early as the 17th century. The Secretary General didn't want to argue with him. He repeatedly emphasized that the spacecraft Kunik saw was hovering above the ground. ZBY pointed out that Mr. Kunik was likely affected by hallucinogens. He had consumed quite a bit of homemade liquor made from poppy seeds. It was normal for his perception to be distorted. Polgar quickly interrupted ZBY and explained that another witness saw the flying object, not a submerged one. It's impossible for both of them to be mistaken. The Secretary General invited the hypnotist, Charlie, to the stage. He requested him to hypnotize Kunik in front of everyone. This way, they could determine whether Kunik was fabricating stories. Everyone became interested upon hearing this. They crowded into the office to watch the hypnosis. Charlie first placed the hypnotic device on Kunik's head to test his sensitivity to hypnosis. Then he counted down from 3. Kunik tilted his head and fell into a deep sleep. When he opened his eyes again, he would truthfully answer all the hypnotist's questions. Polgar noticed that ZBY also snapped his fingers. When Kunik mentioned that those creatures had fins and webbing, ZBY immediately stood up and reiterated his viewpoint on underwater creatures. Unexpectedly, a general wearing sunglasses barged in. His men quickly restrained ZBY. The general then approached Kunik.
Czy przekazali jakąś wiadomość?
Chroncie wodę.
The general's arrival made the banquet an unprecedented success. After ZBY was expelled from the banquet, he was soon arrested by the police on charges of illegal brewing. Julia felt very uneasy inside, but only by honestly following her superior's orders could she be promoted. Soon, she needed to earn a living for her family before going completely blind. That evening, Julia found her daughter by the lake. She was about to tell her about her biological father. However, something suddenly reflected light from the bottom of the lake. Julia quickly grabbed a fishing net and scooped the object out. The next day, she brought the object from the water to see ZBY. It was a prosthetic limb, belonging to ZBY's brother who had been missing for many years.
Nikt go nie porwał. Był cały czas w jeziorze.
All those years of persistence came crashing down. ZBY suddenly felt very lost. Julia mentioned that Polgar and his wife had published a book about extraterrestrials together. ZBY asked Julia to arrange a signing meeting with Polgar. He wanted him to come to the prison. When they met, ZBY candidly admitted that he had hypnotized Kunik. He made him believe he had seen extraterrestrials resembling aquatic creatures. The hypnotist, Mambo, thought I looked familiar, because we attended the same hypnosis academy. ZBY did this entirely to make people believe aliens came from underwater. He wanted to convince himself that aliens had abducted his brother to lessen his own guilt. Polgar stated that it was too late to have second thoughts now. The story of the aliens had already made it into the news, and was published in a book. The lie had already turned into a reality that couldn't be corrected. Before leaving, Polgar asked ZBY why he even had to hypnotize his own daughter.
Ale ja jej nie zahipnotyzowałem.
On the other side, the general successfully became the new head of the Polish government. Upon taking office, he declared a nationwide state of emergency, citing alien civilization's invasion of Poland. This was used to suppress domestic strike actions. So-called supernatural phenomena became a tool for him to seize state power. No wonder the general attended the banquet, supporting the claim that Kunik had been abducted by aliens. Now, the unfortunate farmer was taken away by soldiers for control. He found that the place where he had seen aliens was also completely sealed off. Polgar watched the farce unfolding before him. He knew in his heart that this was a complete lie, and they were merely pawns in the hands of politicians. The story was inspired by the 1978 Emilson abduction incident. Farmer Jan Wolski claimed he was abducted by aliens. The film was visually stunning. It fully showcased the aesthetics of Poland's environment, architecture, and fashion in the 1980s. The overall color palette was very beautiful. However, there were many issues with the plot. The director attempted to blend elements of science fiction, history, and romance, but the narrative was too fragmented. This resulted in a lack of a clear storyline. The alien elements felt more like distractions than core concepts. The series aimed to explore the manipulation of information by politics, media, and the power elite. It criticized the media for chasing sensationalism without verifying facts, revealing how the government used fear and chaos to control the populace. However, the execution was chaotic. Ultimately, the sci-fi effects were lacking. The profound themes intended to be conveyed weren't prominent either.